All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to another edition of Comic Book Team Up with myself and John's Longbox. Tonight we have with us Edward Lilly, and he's going to be talking about his book, which you can get digitally right now. It is completed, fully completed. I just ran across it on Twitter. It looks amazing. Again, I have problems with names all the time, so it's Enoh, the Desert King,
E-
and we're going to take a look at it.
Eno the Desert
Enoh,
King.
that's it. I always get it wrong. Um, so I want to get the first word to you, Edward. Tell us what this book is like and where it came from.
Yeah. So I had this character since I was in college called. It was just the Desert King at that point, and it was just this little kid with orange hair, and I just couldn't stop drawing him for the longest of times. Um, and I was doing professional stuff like storyboarding stuff, commercial stuff, and that was cool. But I was like, man, I got this story in me. I got a comic in me, you know. And eventually, I read the book of Enoch, and I was like, "This book is incredible. Is no one going to take this name or whatever?" So I kind of riffed on the name. I took away the C and I just called it Eno, and it was Eno the Desert King. And I said, "Let me just do a one shot um, for myself because I was super confident in my abilities at that time." I made this book maybe 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And the real origin of the book was I was in Colorado. We just mentioned I was in Tampa, but before here I was in Colorado. And I'm around mountains and you know prairies and all that stuff. And uh,
Yeah, this looks
I
like
was in.
Utah.
What was that?
I said it looks like Utah. Southern Utah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Utah in there. Like I was around mountains, and it just super majestic looking mountains. But really, the origin of the story came from when I was in Colorado. I kind of was in this place of I had to be by myself, and I had to deal with a lot of anger that I had because when I was younger, around 12, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Oh
And
wow.
this was like right after the towers came down, and I just moved from New York, and it was like that was traumatizing for me, and I just became this angry little sick kid. And when I was in Colorado, this was 10, 15 years later, I had to confront that, and I kind of unpackaged it and did all this like whatever shadow work kind of stuff, and I got to this place where I was good, like I released that anger. And this book was kind of the journey of that, of being sick. Why am I here? What is life? Why did this happen to me? And coming out of that. And for Eno, it's the hero's journey, more or less, with a ton of symbolism in there, and overcoming the dragon, that kind of stuff. So that was
Wow.
that was the real origin of the book, and it took longer than I'd like to admit. And I released it in 2019, to friends and family and fans and whoever else. And then the world flipped upside down. And I went on to work on other projects and other things and some indie stuff too, like some indie comic stuff, and had a lot of fun. But I was like, Ed, you got to do a proper release for this book just for yourself, you know? Uh, so I just been releasing the book, and I made a little website, and now I'm talking to you guys. So long story long, that's pretty much the ins and outs of it.
God, I was loving that story. So you know, I mean, geez, 12-year-old kid, and you find out that you're sick, and then you lived in New York. I live in New York still, and I was working in the five boroughs when the towers came down. But I was a full
Mm,
adult, and I was healthy. I can only imagine.
mm,
So you worked out some demons through your art, and
yeah, yeah.
I'm seeing the comments here. They're loving the colors. You know,
Oh, that means everything because I I've always just been like a black and white artist, like I just love pencils and inks. So when I colored it, I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. So the fact that people say that, that's awesome. I appreciate
Well,
that.
I mean, the first couple panels, I was like, I think I've been to that place. I lived out in Albuquerque for a couple of years.
Oh,
So that
okay,
whole
yeah.
that high desert, that's what it looks like. That
Yeah.
if you've been to northern Arizona, the Painted Desert or the Red Rock was that, yeah, Red Rock. This is what it looks
I
like.
was down in Red Rock and in Colorado. I went to Garden of the Gods a lot, and these million-year-old mountains and all that stuff. I was like, man, it left an impression on me for sure.
Oh yeah, my comic's set in Arizona for a reason. It's beautiful out there, and it's almost like you're on another planet. I remember driving from Albuquerque to San Diego a few times because I had a friend that lived in San Diego, and there's this portion that you're like, this isn't the Earth anymore. I wish somewhere in Arizona, but it was almost like aliens put rocks on top of each other because it looked like they shouldn't be stable.
It looks like it shouldn't be there. Yeah. Yeah,
And your
no,
book,
I hear that,
book
man.
brought you right to that. So yeah. So I got to ask: is there a print book or is this digital only?
So right now it's digital only. I am working on getting prints eventually. I had prints a couple years ago and I sold them all, which was great. But it's a 34-page one-shot colored, so that's a little bit pricier than like a 20-page colored or black and white even. So working on that right now. It's a little pricey,
Right.
but it's
Are you
it's
going to do it a
available.
crowdfund?
What's up?
You thinking to do it a crowdfund, like bring it to Fund My
I'm,
Comic and and see what see if you
I'm
could get.
thinking about it. Yeah, that's one of the things I'm thinking about for this and another book that I'm starting in October. That one's black and white because I didn't want to do color again. But yeah, I'm looking at doing a crowdfunding and seeing what I could do with that. Right now, I'm looking at seeing if I can get this into the hands of like hospitals and kids who are sick or have just been diagnosed with diabetes or any sickness really.
Oh
Yeah,
wow!
those are the pencils right there.
Yeah,
And
it's beautiful pencils.
yeah,
Beautiful.
really,
Thank you.
I just met you when I didn't know. Literally, I was messaging RJ, who's coming on tonight? Are we doing it? What's going on? So I'm seeing this from the first. This is my first and honest reaction. This is gorgeous. And now hearing your story, I feel like
Thank you
this is
very much.
important. This is really cool. And
Thank you.
I also, I
Thank you
laughed
so
when you
much.
said you had this little orange head character that you used to draw. I can't draw to save my life, but I did the same thing. I had these characters that I would draw over and over and over. And if I had any talent to draw, I would have done the same thing, but I don't have any drawing talent.
Hey, it's in your heart though. You know what I mean? The
This
talent, I'll say this is that first of all, thank you for your compliment, but I'll say this is the talent, you get super hard on yourself. This was like I was super into the line work and like I need to feel the grit of the paper. Like I became super attentive to details no one will pay attention to, and I was
that
like,
just
ah,
means you're a
why am I
professional.
doing this?
Yeah, I'm
Thank
looking at
you.
the heavy lines around everything, and it just makes everything pop.
Yeah, this is really
Yeah.
good. This is a good surprise for me, and this is something I really really like. I wish, but I'm an old fart. I wish I had it in my hand so I could read it and pick it up and hold it. You know what I mean? Like so. I
Yeah,
got to pick this
that's
up
the
pretty.
next step is I guess crowdfunding, or just getting it printed in general, just working up the scratch to get it printed. Because I do have a couple copies for myself and I flip through it every now and then and I'm like, hey, this is
This
pretty
guy's
cool.
this
But
guy's pretty good.
hey, I did a good job. On Instagram and TikTok, I'm releasing the pages one at a time. I did like a narrated thing where you can hear the narrated word bubbles and all that stuff, and
Cool.
because I had in my mind the the narrator guy from 300 who kind of went in and out of the movie, and I'm like, I picture his voice like reading this book, and I was able to do that, and so I've been releasing those pages like one at a time. I think I'm on 20 now, so I got a
See this?
couple more to go.
And you said you storyboard, so you work on animation.
I did. I have done some animation, but I did mostly commercial storyboards,
Okay.
advertising and all that stuff. But
Because your
that
story.
taught me a lot, though.
No, it
What was
does.
that?
The main, I was just going to say really quick, the main artist that both John and I work with, Renzo Rodriguez, he did the same thing too. He was originally doing the same work, and he just said, I want to draw comics. So it does give you a spectacular background that I think a lot of people are missing when they try to jump straight into comics, because it gives you a really grounded feel to a lot of the things that you're trying to put down on the page.
Yeah, you have to learn about perspective. You have to learn about framing. You have to learn about facial expression. You have to learn how to draw fast. You have to and you have to work with other people. And so I learned a lot from doing storyboards, just as far as the pipeline production, all that stuff. Because this book, I did everything. I did the pencils, the coloring, the line work, the word bubbles. And I'm not a writer, so I'm like, oh, this is. I just reread some of it because I had to use my voice to narrate it, and I'm like, some of this is great, some of this is cringy. I was like, ooh, but it was. This is my first book, you know.
Yeah, but you got the art chops. You know what I mean? You just yes. So, but and like you said, you spent hours making sure that the panels were full, and like, look at that. This is great storytelling. This is how I could tell that you. This is why I thought you would do an animation, because there's no words. There's no words right here, but I could fill in dialogue. I could fill in captions because the art is so good. This is fluid. This is anime. Like when I say storytelling, I a few people, but when I talk about storytelling in comics, and RJ knows, it's the connective tissue between each panel, so that it flows, so that, like, the early Marvel guys, Stan Lee would be like, hey Jack, the Fantastic Four meets the Mole Man, blah 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 blah, go draw it, and then Jack would draw it, and then Stan would see it 2 months later with no script, and he would have to look at the comic to remember the story and to fill in the dialogue. Because there was no script, because he just told it to Jack,
right?
And that became known as the Marvel method, which I think is just really cemented the storytelling idea for comic. But you got this. But I think
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
Like I could be Stan Lee right here. I'm sure I would put the wrong voice because it's your character, but I could narrate this in a way that would make sense, because the art and the connective tissue works really well. I'm geeking out because I really like this. This is.
Oh
really
man,
good.
that's awesome. That means everything to me. That means the world. No, I went to I went to school for animation, and I learned 2D animation, frame by frame stuff, and studied anime and studied Disney and the 12 Old Men and all those guys, and Ghibli and all that stuff. Huge Ghibli fan. And what's his face?
I was about to say, you can see some influences here.
Yeah, for sure. And Toriyama, I picked up a lot of stuff from manga. I picked up a lot of stuff from American stuff, and I think I've always had a hybrid type of style.
Yeah, it is a hybrid. I do see American comics and I do see manga, but I don't see exclusively one or the other. It's a unique thing.
The time when I made this book, I was recently just studying like Frazetta, and I was studying like some of the old masters and all that kind of stuff. So I was like super, like, wanted to do something realistic. I don't ever want to do this again. It was a pain in the ass. I love it, but it was a pain in the ass.
I'm seeing, like you said, I see Frazetta, I see Mobius, I see so many different influences in this. I really like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, dude, you got to print this. It's almost be a crime not to get this in people's hands.
I see Nausicaa, honestly. If you ever know that animation.
A lot of Ghibli stuff. I wish at the time, I appreciate the comments on the colors, but I was just looking at a Ghibli film, Tales of Earthsea, and I was like, man, I wish I had pulled these colors because that's what I wanted. But I think I was able to get it across really well. And it's funny, you're just looking at the black and whites, the colors. Yeah, some of the pages I did a really good job.
Vaz is asking, was this originally drawn on paper or on a computer?
The pencils were done on paper, 11 by 17.
Wow, beautiful stuff. Yeah, honestly, I was going to say, reminds me. I work with so does John, with Mike Gustovich. He used to work for Marvel a long time ago. He did mostly inking, and I see your inking qualities. Just, again, with the heavy outline and everything else, you know what you're doing, and it's beautiful to see someone who actually can, follow through with I have good pencils and then finish the story so that it's understandable.
Are you
Thank
familiar
you.
with
Yeah.
Rini, who does a comic called Fiendish? Are you familiar with that comic at all? It's a
What's
crowdfunded
the name
comic.
of the comic again?
It's called Fiendish. Like, to me, you and her, I think, would hit it
English.
off. Like, this comic, it's her own fantasy story, and she is super
Mm.
super into the world building, and like you could talk to her about. I think you and her should talk. That
Yeah,
would
because
be
you have a
fun.
similar
Oh
style.
yeah,
Yeah,
send me
She
those
used
connections.
to work for Marvel for just a little bit, but they said you're going in too far of an anime style, and they said you can't go that way. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to go do my own stuff."
Yeah, and that
Mm.
I think you and her, I think, would become like fast friends just from looking at each other's art.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm here connecting. I'm willing to connect with anyone. And the fact that I'm talking to you guys, what's funny is I was gonna show up on another podcast, but that fell through because I guess they were going through something. So when I got your invite, I was like, oh yeah, like God closes the door and opens a window, right? And then I freaked out and typed my response too fastly. But yeah, I'm willing to connect with anyone because I want it to be seen. Like it might be my first book and whatever mistakes, but I think it's special. I think there's a lot of meaning behind it, especially with it's really a one shot to help kids who are going through something. It's your hero's journey. There's a ton of symbolism in here. There's because I'm interested in symbolism and subconscious archetypes and all that Carl Jung stuff. And that was in here. It was in here before I even knew that I was doing that. I was already in tune with that. So
How
I'm
long did it take you
I
to do
love
this? From the day you first picked up a pencil to the day you put down your pencil, so this is done.
honestly, it took me over 18 months.
Okay,
That's
okay,
not too bad, actually, compared to
that's not
some of
bad.
the
Yeah,
crowdfunded stuff that's out there. And I had to say, like, I mean, you're talking about you don't think that you don't know if you'll do good in crowdfunding, but honestly, there's a lot of people out there that have nowhere close to this amount of detail and the ability to put panels together like this. You're making you think a few missteps here and there, but there are a lot of people out there who are selling comics like hotcakes just on crowdfunded for their own audience anyway, and they make more missteps
Mm,
than good steps, right? And
yeah,
I mean, you have the
mm.
chops. That's what
yeah,
I'm looking. I was looking at your art, going, "Yeah, I got to talk to this guy."
yeah. If you are interested in the crowd, I'll help promote you as much as I can. I'll try to introduce you to a couple of people that I think could help. I think
That'd
this
be
is
awesome, man. Thank you. I would appreciate that. Because it's the first time I did it, the first time I I released the book, I was like, nervous. But now I'm like, Ed, hearing your guys' feedback and seeing the feedback in the comments, I'm like, and
it's
just feedback in general, I'm like, yeah, I can totally do this.
normal
I'm
to be
ready for
nervous.
that.
There's nothing wrong with being nervous, just as long as it doesn't hold
Yeah,
you back. You said before it was from
right.
the book of Enoch, and then So could you tell me more about that? That's another thing that's interesting to me. How
Yeah. It
like
was in 2012, and I, me and my dad were like going down this rabbit hole of like uh the apocrypha stuff, and he told me about the book of Enoch, and then I just read it, or I listened to an audiobook on YouTube or whatever. And I was like, this is incredible. You have this kid going, person going up to heaven and meeting God and angels and the hierarchy of angels, and I'm like, I'm eating this stuff up because I'm seeing the parallels in comics, right? Like the angels were, Ral, Raphael, Samael, and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, Kal-El, right?
Cal? Yeah,
Like
all the
he's
Celestials
in
and
music.
all the Celestials, they had angelic names, and
All that stuff. The
yeah,
firmament, and the firmament was in Marvel, so I'm picking the
yeah,
pieces of the strings of
crazy, yeah,
history that happened between whenever that book was written and seeing the stuff in Marvel and DC and anime and all this stuff. I'm like, I see it. And so I said, no one's gonna take this name. I'm gonna take the name. I'll change it around a little bit.
Well, I just got to let you know. Next month, I got my comic Enoch Kicks Ass is coming. So you got to.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
only,
You really got a character named Enoch?
no, I'm joking. I'm making a joke.
Oh, okay. I was ready for it. I'm ready to go.
No, the only Enoch I know isn't that from Land of the Lost? The Good Sleestack, wasn't his name Enoch? RJ, you're probably the only other old person who knows
Oh man, I haven't watched Land of the Lost in a long time, John.
that. You know what I'm talking about?
I think that's one we got to get back to.
It's an
I
old.
think they used the word Enoch too in the last Ahsoka Star Wars joint. There was a character named Enoch.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, doesn't Enoch is a human that goes up to heaven and he becomes the angel Metatron?
Yeah, that's him. That's the one.
Yeah. So, yeah, yeah. I used that character in my role playing games a few times. Believe it or not, Enoch. Enoch is a character in one of my superhero role playing games.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most interesting characters in mythology and lore and stuff. Because there was only one line in the Bible where he was like, and he walked with God and was taken up. And what does that mean? Why did you put that there? Come to find out, there's like 2 or 3 books. So I got super into that because I'm into spirituality, mythology, and all that kind of stuff. And that one particular character really struck a chord with me. And so if I were going to continue the story, which I have arcs written, and all that stuff, it'd be like a retelling of that using this kid.
Cool.
I got to say though, I think that you, quite honestly, and this is a bit of praise here because your story, when I'm looking at it with the art, is you're probably doing man versus himself, and that's an extremely hard thing to get down on a page. The fact that you can do that, and still at the same time bring the entire book forward according to that way. I mean, I've seen people do it in novels and things like that, but to do it with pencils, that takes skill. That's what I'm going to say. Because, most blue sky superhero stuff is man versus man versus nature, but man versus himself, that's an entirely different creature. This I think is something unique.
Yeah. This struck me instantly. It hasn't happened in a while. Yeah.
And it does remind me of Mobius. A lot of stuff.
It reminds me of so many things. Like you said, when he was like Frazetta, I'm like, okay, I see Frazetta, I see Mobius, I see Gib, but at the same time, it's not like, oh look, it's you swipe this, you swipe that. No, this is your own unique thing. But I could kind of see some of the inspirations. But it's I could definitely see like manga, even though I don't know much about manga. But I was like, you got to talk to Rini. This is. You guys are like,
yeah, I would love to talk to her and thank you so much for the words, because that was one of the biggest things I was concerned about. I was like, I have to hold the audience for every page, and it's just this kid. There's no one else to bounce off of.
That's tough.
I was like, how do I do that? And it definitely was a self versus self, using nature as a symbolism for that. So it's like man versus nature / man versus self, with one symbolizing the other.
This is really good. I really like this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So really quick question for you. You said you don't do colors very much. What's the color palette that you pulled from? Was it, I know you said that it's more of an earth tone from what you saw around you, but was there, I'm always looking at color theory and things like that in some of my videos, because I detest what they are trying to do right now with comics, because I think it's a mud color. But is there a specific color palette that you would pick from a book besides what you saw around you? Anything like that?
Yeah. I would pick up what was around me, and I definitely did a lot of research into guys like Mobius, into who else? Assad Ribic. I pulled from his color palette a little bit. Frazetta, obviously, I did my best, tried to do my best. These pages, the color isn't on my website, but if you go to my Instagram, I just posted these pages. I think you'll get a kick out of that if we're talking about color, because the color for those elephant pages specifically, I think are to this day still some of my best stuff.
Cool. I love that.
But I didn't want to give away all the goods on my website, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like looking at the black and white, and I like looking at the color. You know, it's yeah. I think.
But seeing the pencils, I love the pencils. I'm glad you guys are looking at the pencils because I can go through those.
And you said you were working on something else too, a sequel to this, or another story.
It's a entirely different story done in an entirely different style, done
Really?
in an entirely different world. Yeah, because I got these ideas, man. So I got to
Oh,
get it out of my head, off my chest.
that's good. So you have a
But I
whole
do
different
have
art
more
style.
written for him. What was that?
I said, so you have a completely different art style then for another story.
Mm-hmm.
See, I
Because I'm
can't
all
draw.
about. Yeah, it's weird. Like I wish I had like my whatever art style, but I spent so long working on the foundations, I realized style is nothing more than just the package. As long as the foundations are there, you can change up a lot. So my
What
next
did
book
Neil
is going to
Adams say?
be
He said, um, "Style is just a combination of all your mistakes."
exactly. So my next book is going to be more traditional, more like just standard comic black and white, maybe a little manga style thrown in there, but it's going to be a full black and white book with your hard blacks and your a lot of cross hatching shit.
What's the genre? What is
Cyberpunk.
cyberpunk? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
It's the complete opposite of this. Is the
yeah. So
total
it's gonna be
opposite of this.
what, like a little more harsh lines and dark black and white. Yeah,
I
Yeah.
love the pencils because there's a book that I'm doing right now. We're trying to get it out. It's Crom the Destroyer, so it's a low fantasy, but I offer it both as it's about 88 pages, both as a colored graphic novel and as an art book, which is in the magazine format, which basically is the size of the old Conan. Savage Sword of Conan, right? So you can see the pencils and everything else because they have two beautiful artists, Nick X and Jim O'Reilly working on it. And I could just when I reduced everything down and then colored it after it was inked by Mike Gustovich, it's like there's missing so much of the pencils here. I need to do an art book to let everybody see the black and white.
I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with Jim's work, but I know Nick's work, and it is outstanding. Like, yeah, I could look at Nick's work in pencils and in colors and in just like I'm looking at this. To see this in color is like it's almost like a different piece of work. I don't know which one I like better.
Yeah, and I get mixed up with colors sometimes because sometimes I see, black and white stuff, and I'm just like, the colors are cool, but I think my eye just trends towards that.
I
But when you see good coloring, it's
great.
unmatched.
I like my superhero comics to be in color and everything like that. But when I look at this, I find myself looking at the artwork, the pencils, and like the draftsmanship. When I see it in color, I think I'm looking at it as a whole, and
Hmm.
I think we pay attention to two different things. So it's cool to see this in black and white, and like if you release this as a comic, to put a couple of black and white pages at the back, or maybe if you hit a stretch goal, like a black and white edition, or or
Yeah, I
offer a couple
definitely wanted to do
let
a
people
black
buy
and white edition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
One of the
definitely
things
wanted
that
to do
I
that.
always go on about is that I honestly think that with the history of comics, I always like to go look through the history of comics, but comics started as black and white and then they went into color.
Mm.
And I think we've lost a lot of comic literacy within North America over the last 2 decades. And for
Hmm.
people to start going back to black and white just might be the thing to, give a more basic story again to bring that comic literacy back into your popular culture.
You know,
Yeah, I can see that. When I study the inks of Buscema, Steve Buscema, the
I
guy who
always
did
say
Tarzan. What's his name?
yeah, but I don't know if I'm saying it right. But I always say Buscema.
Yeah, me neither. But those guys, those guys, Frazetta and those guys, when I study their inks, they are inking lighting as well. You know, that's tough.
Yeah,
Drawing lighting, that's is also tough. And it's funny that I'm also a big fan of, I grew up with Mark Bagley and Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane and David Finch and like those guys, and when I look at their hyper detailed ink drawings, they're inking lighting like, and I think that crop of people was like really kind of the last group of people who did that. I think what's his name now, Jorge Menez does that very well, but he's putting out like 1,000 pages a year, so he doesn't have the time to focus on one book, So I think it's hard inking lighting and rendering lighting. And it's something, it takes time and you have to have an eye for it.
didn't Bill what's it? Bernie Wrightson say that black and white was tougher than colored. That if he knew he was doing black and white work, he knew he had to work harder than he knew if it was going to get colored. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. I think black and white is
I'm a big fan of.
I just think, yeah, I love black and white art, especially comic art when you see, and that's why I wanted this, because I want you to see the texture of the pencil. I wanted you to see the grit of the graphite on the paper. And dude, like I was so anal when I went to the scanner wasn't picking up the grit of the paper. You know what I
I know
mean?
exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what, because I was just talking like I was saying, Mike Gustovich, he's an old hand, right, doing inking. He does it with pen or with brushes, right? And the fact he sends
Mm,
me back, and he's an old fella, so he sends me back these scans, and these scans have like hand marks on them. These scans have a grit to them that are not there in any of the digital stuff I get from other artists, and
mm,
it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, they sent me.
mm, mm,
Mike sent me the original. He did a cover for me. He did, the pencils and inks, and and then Michael T. Gilbert, another old timer, sent me the original artwork, and you could just you could see like little imperfections, I guess, where their hand must have laid on a line before it was completely. But I love it. You know what I mean? Like so, like
mm.
and then
It's
I
character.
got it colored, and you don't see that on the cover of the comic. I'm like, it's kind of
Mm.
missing little artifacts.
Yeah, and even when I do digital stuff, I try to add as much texture in there as I can just to give it that extra oomph, just to give it that extra little bit of realism. And I think digital has come a really long way because now I've started to add more texture brushes in the background and stuff so it looks more, it looks more real. I think I could actually get away with it. Like if I told you it was real, you might believe me.
I'll believe you. I'll believe. I didn't when I first. I met John Romita Sr. I'm trying to remember what year it was, and he
Mm,
was talking about drawing. And yeah, in my mind, people draw. You got a drawing board, you get your pencils, you get your inks. And he was talking about how his son draws digitally, and he can't do. And I was like, "What do you mean he draws?" Like I didn't. I was so out of it, I didn't know that digital. And he was saying he likes the resistance of the paper on the pencil, and he likes the way
mm,
he spent decades with the way he was
right.
explaining the way the grit on the paper will move the pen. He goes, because I tried digital. He goes, my hand just moves too fast. Like he goes, I don't feel that tactile sensation. He goes, I don't like it. So I don't know.
Yeah,
So
there's a big difference, with digital stuff, the convenience of the brushes and you could erase your blacks and like you could do a lot of tricks, right? But when you're on paper, there's something, it's a tactile feel. And before I did Enoh and I was studying a lot, and this is like 14, 15, 16, I there was an online class, and I would just study these classes for hours a day, gesture drawing. I mean, I must have filled up 20 sketchbooks. So I was like, I have to draw on paper because that's what I'm used to, you know? And it's just it does something to the hand, it does something to the line work.
And I have to say too, if you ever go the crowdfunded route, one of the great things about it is you can have a perk where you offer um, some of the pages, and you can make a good
Mm,
chunk of change offering pages because there are people out there who want that art and will pay for it.
Yeah.
So you know,
mm. I don't
Yeah.
know if I could part with
I
the
was going to say, I
pages.
don't know if you, I was watching your face when I said, that tells me you don't want, you know,
I know eventually at some point for sure, but it's one of those things like, you know what I mean? Like that's yeah, I know at some point I will, but for right now I'm selfish. I enjoy looking at them myself.
I know Brian Bow, who does the comic Wolf and Batsy, he says he won't sell the original pages from his comics. He says it's not
Mm,
because of vanity, or he says it's a practical reason. He wants to keep them so he can scan them again and make, you know, if he needs to do them in graphic novel format or whatever. He goes, I don't want to do a scan of a scan of a scan of a scan, and then they lose detail over it. He goes,
right.
so he won't sell them for that reason, which I don't
Yeah,
know
I,
that. But he hand draws, and then I don't know what the artist technique is to convert it to digital, but so he won't sell the
it's usually
original.
you just gotta scan it in, and you have to have a good scanner that picks up the grit of the paper. You gotta get the grit of the paper. Even if you simulate the grit of the paper on digital, it's still it feels like a texture more than part of the book. But it's funny. I went to Tampa Bay Comic Con last week on Friday, and one of the artists that was there was the inker. I think his name was John Dell, and he inked over Ramita Senior and Junior, and he inked over Mark Bagley and a couple of other people. And I saw his stuff. I've seen professional inkers before and all that stuff, but his stuff, to see that quality of ink and quality of black and white up close was like a master class. And I just had my eyes open, flipping through his pages, and I'm like, this stuff is incredible. It's like master level anchor. So it was super cool to see that.
So I take it you went to art school. Then from art school, you were doing a story, not storyboard. You were doing a storyboards for commercials and things like that, right? Is that what you said?
More or less,
Commercial.
I went to art school, and then I moved out to Colorado because my parents moved out to Colorado. I had no money because I went to art school, and then and then yeah, I was like, what do I want to do? Because I went to school for animation, but I still wanted to do comics. And I was like, oh, storyboards, that seems to be a nice in between. And then I studied storyboards on my own, just buying books. And I learned so much about directing and where the eye goes and how the eye can be manipulated and layout and all that stuff. And eventually, I went to New York for like a month to try to get something going. Uh, and the people I did an internship with in school, they were like, "Oh, hit up this director, and he's a commercial director." And he was like, "I'm doing a commercial for Virgin Galactic. Want to do it?" I was like, "Yeah." "Oh, I'm doing a commercial for Samsung. You want to do it?" I was like, "Yeah." So I went from zero to doing like these high budget commercials, and I had all this money coming in. I was learning and teaching and all this stuff. And I said, I got to do a comic because I'm super confident in my skills right now. And this is the result of that.
Are you still doing that stuff now?
Ah, man, it's been tough. To be honest with you, it's been tough breaking back in to the storyboards because people don't use them anymore that much.
Oh,
And there's a handful of people who do commercial boards, but it's apparently, I've been talking to people and it's been shrinking. It's been shrinking. So it's a toss up between, do I want to continue to do comics? Do I want to like switch over to see if I can do boards for movies and TV and all that stuff? So right now, I just want to make one more comic and then we'll see what happens. I
Okay.
got to get it in my brain.
You have did you ever bring your stuff to Marvel or DC and see if they'd hire you?
Not yet. Not yet. I just did a submission for Dynamite Comics.
Oh, good. Yeah,
Storyboards is becoming a lost art. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Storyboards are becoming a lost art.
because I could see the only reason they wouldn't hire you is you probably would want a real decent salary and a real decent payment.
Yeah, that'd be nice. But honestly, there's multiple ways to make money, but that would definitely be nice. But no, I want to approach Marvel and DC. I want to approach everyone really. I think
Yeah.
between this book and the next book, talk about versatility style wise, they're gonna be two completely different things. And the fact that I am very confident I could pull it off. Uh,
Well, it's because you got the fundamentals. I mean, I'm looking at this page right here, and the
Yeah.
fact you said you were doing animation, you can see that you're
Yeah.
grounded in animation because of the movement. I mean, things
Mm.
flow, not only do things flow, but the body positions for movement. It's just, it makes your eye go in that direction of, turning a still into movement on the page by going panel to panel. And a lot of people just can't do that. They're illustrators and they're illustrating a static picture that doesn't work with sequential art, but yours is flow.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much for that. Because it's something I've tried very hard to capture, and when you're studying, live, when you're doing a lot of life drawing and anatomy stuff and studying the old masters, they're all stills. So I didn't get paranoid, but I was like, how do I make sure I capture movement in these still poses? How do I make sure I capture momentum and kinetic energy in these still poses? And it is difficult. It is difficult, you know. But
Now,
thank you. Thank you so much for your compliments, guys. It means the world.
would you like say RJ's like, I got a project for you? Would you work for another writer?
Oh yeah. I love working with writers. I I worked with one over the pandemic. Uh we did Eniad Rule of Nine. It was another indie book that did get funded on Kickstarter a couple times. I would love to work with a writer because I'm not a writer and I don't want to think about writing. I just want to draw pictures.
Oh, so this was just a personal story that you wanted to get out of your system, then?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a personal story I wanted to get out my system. And the next story isn't even personal. I just need to get it out my system. I've always been wanting to do some cyberpunk stuff, I love sci-fi. I love, Blade Runner and Ghost in the Shell and anything Ridley Scott does. And I'm like, I gotta just get it out of my system.
That's good. Yeah.
I think you would actually, I don't know. I haven't seen anything about your cyberpunk, but I think your cyberpunk would be a lot different than most people's because most people's ideas of technology seem to be static and angular, whereas yours is again much more flow, much more circular, much more of an idea that a lot of people don't usually take into cyberpunk.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely want to mess with shapes. I definitely want to mess with shapes. And I want to push the genre forward in a sense where it's like with cyberpunk, a lot of this stuff comes from just neon lights, where you get that hard highlight, and I love that. But I'm like, where else can we get light sources from? So I'm thinking about where a light source is coming from. I'm thinking about where are where's the wind coming from? I'm thinking about, if this is a futuristic planet or whatever, what's the technology? Like I'm thinking about how can I take the cyberpunk mystery thriller genre and push it forward in a way that it looks different. It's the same, but
Yeah,
it's different.
I know
It's like
exactly what you
Cyberpunk
mean.
version 2.0.
Yeah, because I'm like I said, I have a character, Crom the Destroyer, and in my mind, the next couple of stories, one of them would be strictly black and white, where he's basically almost the entire issue in a cave, so there'd be more black than actual white. You know what I mean? It's
Nice.
that kind of
Yeah,
use of shadow and light that plays on the mind, and it's beautiful for visual storytelling.
nice. Yeah, that sounds super exciting. When you're there, when there's more black than white, and you just get that hard highlight and that really eeriness. Yeah, I would. I'm I'm interested in what that would look like.
Did you ever read the old comic Cerebus by Dave Sim? That was like the classic.
No, I
Just
didn't read that.
yeah. It starts out really really good. It starts out as a parody of Conan. It's this Cerebus the Aardvark going around killing everybody. But then
Mm.
around around 50 issues, it's all politics. But it's literally people sitting around tables talking. But I kind of lost interest in the story. But the art is outstanding. It's black and white, and it's a guy doing a monthly comic or as close to monthly as he gets. So he's really experimenting with a lot of blacks. Like there'll be a couple panels of like people sitting around a table and they're discussing the high council of this medieval city, but the lights
Oh
coming
wow.
through. You know what I mean? So it's really striking. But then when you sit back and you think about it, it's like that didn't take too long because it's mostly a black panel. You know what I mean? With
Uh, what's it
but
called again? That sounds
Cerebus.
really interesting.
Oh, I think it's right up your alley. It's Cerebus the Aardvark. You could buy like the
Cerebus.
Goblin Cerebus the Aardvark.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely gotta check that out. Cause I've been
Yeah.
do for like the past year, I've been studying lighting, looking at movies in black and white, looking at Star Wars in black and white, looking at James Bond in black and white, like trying to pull from all this stuff because I really want to focus on the frames within the frames with
Yeah,
this
check.
next book.
I think you would really
Yeah.
like Dave Sim Cerebus.
That's again, that's exactly what I'm doing right now as well, because I have a book. We already have the first issue ready to go, but we haven't put it out yet. It's called Fade to Blue, and it's basically set in the 1930s. But I go back to um, uh, the old black and white, basically detective stories to try to get the feel from that, because I want the
Mm.
entire thing to be black and white with just shades of blue here and there,
Ooh,
to
nice.
because it's basically a film noir, but with a little bit more supernatural elements to it. So yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from,
Oh,
and
that sounds awesome.
it's one of the things too that Will Eisner always talked about when he talked about the fact that he thinks that sequential art is the closest thing you can get to an actual stage play because of lighting, because of the way you can light the
Mm,
characters, right?
yeah,
I got to
yeah.
say, Will Eisner. I when I was working at the comic store when I was like 17, 18 years old, the guy Larry, he was like, you got to read Will Eisner, and that's how I got exposed. And the kitchen sink did reprints of those spirit stories, but they were black and white, and I
Mhm,
loved them. And like it was just his use. Like I used to say, these are like little miniature stage plays. The way the lighting was a big
mm,
deal, and then they put out hardcover collected editions. But I didn't know this. This is how stupid I was. They were originally in color, but Kitchen Sink
mm.
reprinted them in black and white just to save money. But I like
Wow.
the black and white so much better. So that's another thing. Like if you could ever find like they're like $1 if you could find them in dollar, in bins, like the Kitchen Sink kitchen
Mhm.
spirit comics that are in black and white. They are
Yep.
so good as far as you're talking about studies of light and dark in comics. And I
Yeah.
think Archie could agree
I
with
gotta
me.
write
Well,
this stuff down. Y'all are giving me some new study stuff to look into.
yeah, Cerebus by Dave Sim and The Spirit or anything by Will Eisner, because he
Oh
later
yeah.
on he did like a Contract of God. My favorite is A Life Force. These were just black and white books. They were never in color.
Mm.
But yeah, I loved anything by Will Eisner, especially those black and
Now
white things.
here's the funny thing is how I found yeah, that's the website right there. The funny thing is how I found your page was I was doing some anatomy stuff and I had this one chick like holding up an axe and I was like, "Oh man, that's Red Sonja right there, Red Sonja." And so I started drawing Red and got so locked in, like I got my OCD kicked in. I was like, I got to finish this picture, and I'm skulking around on Twitter. I haven't used Twitter in 5 years because I didn't like it. I didn't like social media, and I didn't like Twitter. But I've been skulking around there trying to like get back into it. I just made my first post today, in preparation for this, and I typed in Red Sonja. Is it Red Sonja or Red Sonja?
I always say Red Sonja, but there is a J in it.
I'll
So
say
I
Red
don't know.
Sonja.
Am I saying it right? Red. Well, the movie said Red Sonja.
I'll say Red Sonja then. So I typed in Red Sonja on X, and your images came up, and I was like, oh, word. And then I found your page, and I was like, oh, this page is sick. So I followed you, and then you sent me the invite for here. But I'll post that tomorrow. It is also a black and white thing, but it's like I think it actually looks closer to this style here, or my penciled style, where but with a little splash of like watercolor brushes on it. I think you guys will like it. So it's like here are my big interests is like fantasy, high fantasy, and cyberpunk shit. I don't know why those two completely opposite things, but I love it.
Oh, you like? Well, I like superheroes and I like Tolkien. You know what I mean? Like, but I guess they both have that hero. But you know, but that's I
Yeah.
yeah, I could just as much as I could pontificate about superhero comics with anybody. I could go on and on and on about Tolkien. You know, and then I don't know if you ever listened to RJ's channel. He basically it's like going to church, except instead of a preacher, it's a philosopher talking about like, you know, that's how I found RJ's channel was listening to him talk about the heroic ideal and you know and the virtues. So he's the smart one. Like if it's Calvin and Hobbes, he's Calvin, I'm Hobbes. You know, if you remember that strip, I'm the tiger who just wants a belly rub. RJ's the smart one.
I was going to ask. We got about 8 minutes before our hour is up, but you were talking about mythology that inspires you. What kind of mythology? Because I'm deep into mythology. What kind of mythology has inspired you the most?
Did we lose you?
I think
I
Ed had
froze.
frozen. Let's
Well,
see. Let's see.
see if he comes back. But RJ, yesterday I had George O'Connor on my channel, and he does a series of books on mythology, and that was I think you would enjoy my conversation with him if you got time to listen to that.
Okay. And who who does he publish with?
First, second books, and it's a series of his first 12 books were called the Olympians, and each book one is Zeus, book two is Hera, you know, Artemis, and it just tells. It takes all of the sort, and then in the back he quotes the sources and has a glossary. You know, it's like a scholarly work, but for school age kids. And that now he's doing the Asgardians, so he's following it up. Oh, there you go. I don't.
Can you guys see me, hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're fine. Did you hear us when you were frozen?
Yeah. I was like, what happened? Come back.
It happens.
I was just
No,
asking. What about
right.
your influences? Your mythology influences?
Right. So yeah, definitely Judeo Christianity was like my first foundation because my mom is Jewish convert to Christian and my dad was a preacher.
Oh wow.
And so that whole thing was always one idea for me, right? The Judeo Christianity. So like the whole Bible is, some people are new to it. Like the whole thing was just one long idea, right? But then in second or third grade, they're like, here's the pyramids. And I'm like, what's that about? What's the pyramid? So I got super interested in Egyptology because that's fascinating. And
Yeah.
then you start studying the history of China, you go, that's its own whole epic other thing. So I had a hard time reconciling that there are so many cultures with so many different perspectives, kind of more or less saying a similar idea, right? And so when I read the book of Enoch or started stepping outside of, you know, canonical Christianity, that stuff blew my mind, and I just kept going down that rabbit hole forever, and I'm still down it. And so yeah, I pull from, you know, Judeo-Christianity and the Apocrypha. Egyptology has always interested me. Then you study, the Sumerians and all that kind of stuff, and
Yeah,
and then all
I
this
love that.
stuff
I'm with you.
bleeds together. I think a lot of people get caught up with, oh, they stole from here and this stole from that, but for me, it's one amazing story. Whether it's this generation of this part of the world or this generation from that part of the world, but there's a reflection of singular truths being told. And that's why I love studying Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell, because they did that. They studied all those things to pick up on those similarities. So when you have a Star Wars or a Tolkien, you're getting another reinterpretation of these deep esoteric universal truths, and studying that stuff just soothes my brain and soul, because I can't help but see it, but then don't have a outlet to talk about it or do anything about it except for my art.
One of the things that always fascinated me, and we're just looking at your art and thinking about black and white and Egyptology, all that kind of stuff. And you're set in the desert here, but this is a rocky desert that you're in with this book. But
Mhm.
one of the things that always fascinated me is black and white, old black and white drawings of basically sand dunes and things like that, where they have the shapes of the sand dunes, which I live in the north. So, I'm
No sand
always
dunes.
looking at the snow when it does the exact
Yeah.
same thing when it whips around and it makes these unique shapes. And I always thought, I haven't really come across someone to do it, but I would love to see a book, almost an Egyptology book or something like that, that focused on
Mm,
shapes that, sequential art that was bent around the shapes of what you would normally see within sands, and how that would flow and things like
mm,
that. Because I think that would work
mm.
spectacularly in black and white.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things is I love snow on trees. So I would love like a whole book, like a black and white book of like people in a a forest in the winter. Like so the
Mm,
backdrop is always just think of the light coming in of snow on pine trees and things like that. It's the backdrop of a whole book.
yeah,
You
that
know,
would be really great too. Man,
so
you guys
when you were going on and
feeding
on
my
about all
imagination.
when you were going on and on about all of the Egypt and the I was just like, hey, this is Jack Kirby. You know, this is what is probably going on in his head. Sitting in that little dungeon room, at that,
Mm,
he's looking at Egypt and he's looking at Mesoamerica and he's looking at Superman and they said that his wife wouldn't let him drive because he would daydream while driving and get lost because he had all this stuff going on in
I
his
know the
head.
feeling.
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
then you crash into a tree and break your neck, like I did. Yeah,
Oh man.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I do that too. I gotta remember to pay attention. But look at how that influenced his sci-fi stuff though.
right,
Look
right.
at the shapes he used for those buildings and Galactus and all that stuff. You know what I mean? It's like he used that and funneled it into a whole new way of thinking. Like
When,
Jack's stuff is like
when,
his, not just his comic stuff, but like his murals and paintings are bonkers,
and
wild stuff.
and nobody else could do like I think John Buscema is like the only one who could like do a reasonable copy of Jack Kirby, but
Yeah,
everybody else it doesn't look right. It looks like
no,
other
it
people
doesn't.
trying to be Jack Kirby, but it doesn't
Yeah,
look right.
Jack had this. What do you call
Yeah,
it?
it's Kirby's birthday today.
I don't
That's
want to
probably
say.
why. Yeah,
Oh wow, yeah, it is his birthday today. I
it's all
forgot.
cosmically connected there, Edward.
Yep. It's in the ether. It came back here, right? But Jack had this natural. I don't want to say intensity, but he had this natural, just overwhelming presence on the page.
Yep.
And it's where he put the lines. It's the way he put the line work. It's the shapes he used, the little intricate details like that. That it was natural. You can't duplicate you can't duplicate that type of thought, much less that style.
The fun thing is, though, that everybody for the next 50 years tried to imitate that style and then got their own style out of that, which is one
Right.
of the beautiful things about comics for the last, since Jack Kirby.
Yeah, that is also very true too. I love comic art, man. I
Yeah.
like, and my hope is, the first intention is for this book to get it in the hands of two groups of people. One, the kids who need that pick me up. I mean, I was diagnosed 6 months after 9/11. Imagine being diagnosed now. Like I was super sick and, lost weight, and I was already a tiny, scrawny kid. But imagine being diagnosed with anything or being sick today, like on top of everything. You know what I mean? That's who
Did
this
you
book is
recover?
for. And
Is your health good?
the second group is people like yourselves, people who are interested and appreciate good ass art.
Are you healthy now?
Yeah, I'm healthy now. I'm
Okay,
healthy
good,
now.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've lived with it for 25 or almost 20 years, or more, almost 25 years, because I was diagnosed after 9/11, 2001. So
So
I've learned a lot from learning to maintain my health. And, I have good and bad days, but
do you think like
mostly good days.
that your illness, because H.P. Lovecraft was diagnosed with, I forget what he had, but so
Mm,
he stayed home and read and wrote. Do you think your
mhm.
illness like contributed to you being this wonderful artist? Trying to put a positive spin of being diagnosed with an illness. Like,
No, it
if you were
definitely
healthy,
did.
you would have been out playing football and you know to
No,
be
it definitely did. Um, you know, you think about 2001 to now, I didn't go out a lot as a kid, and I had movies and video games and comics, and that I was lucky enough to have some really great friends, but I had Star Wars and Lord of the Rings movies just came out, and Dragon Ball Z and Naruto and all the Japanese stuff and all the American stuff, and the Ultimates was just released, and Marvel, the Avengers just came back together. Looking at David Finch's work, and I'm like, I was bombarded with
yeah.
the best shit. You know what I mean? From like, the Spider-Man just came out in theaters, friggin' the Clone Wars and the Matrix. You know what I mean? Like that turn of the century stuff was the best.
Yeah,
And I was a kid and I was sick. I just download that stuff into my brain. So it's like, what else was I supposed to do?
I tell myself, I'm like, can you imagine like me as a kid? I'm a older guy. Just 15-year-old me. That like, hey John, there's going to be an Ant-Man movie one day. Tell 50, I would have been like, what are you? Don't, no way. And then
Mm.
and then that vision comes back like an hour later. He goes, not only there's going to be an Ant-Man, there's going to be 3 Ant-Man movies, and you're going to be so sick of it, you're not even going to go see the third one in the movie theater. I'm like, now I know you're messing with me. Now go away. This is the hunger talking. I'll eat a Snickers, you'll go away or something.
Oh, that's too funny. That is too funny. I mean, hey, we got some really good movies from the MCU, so it is what it is, you know.
Yeah.
All right, Edward. Well, we've gone over our hour. I like to usually keep it to an hour, leave them wanting more. But I got to say, this hour has flown by. This has been
Yep.
thoroughly enjoyable conversation with you, and I'd like to have you back on. If you get yourself any other books out there, you let us know, because I'm sure, and this is going to be a great video for anybody who wants to look at beautiful art. So,
Yeah.
thank you very much for being here. I want to give you the last word about your book, so you can give a little elevator pitch to people who came late.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me. This has been a great conversation. For giving me this platform. And yeah, just to recap, Enoh the Desert King was inspired by my diagnosis with diabetes, as well as 9/11 and all that stuff, and me having to deal with that being a sick, angry little kid. And once I dealt with my emotions, living in Colorado, um, I was compelled to make this one-shot book uh, to help kids who were and are like myself, sick and angry and just need a helping hand and need a little pick me up. And that is what, was the inspiration for this book. And I released it a couple years ago, and I wanted to re-release it because I thought I owed it to myself. And now I'm talking to you guys. So I'm just going to continue with the momentum, and I will definitely let you guys know uh, whenever the next book comes out and whatever style it's in. And I started today posting on X, but you could also follow me on
I just sent
TikTok
you a
and
message.
Instagram. What's that?
I just sent you a message while you were talking, just so you know.
Awesome.
I'd like to introduce you to a few people. I think you'd get along.
Yeah,
All right.
that'd
Well,
be great.
Well, I just want to let everybody know that the link for his book, which you can get digitally, is in the description of this video. In case you're coming in late, we did put it in the chat, but it is in the description for the video. So click on that and you can go on over and take a look at the gallery that we've been looking through during this video. And really go order yourself a copy of his book. Get yourself a digital copy. This beautiful, beautiful art here. All right. Thank you very much, Edward. Thank you very much, John, for being here. And I want to thank everybody in the chat for being here as well. We will see you again next week on John's channel for Comic Book Team Up. All right. I want to say
Thanks for having me.
goodbye.
Take care, guys. Nice meeting
Bye-bye.
you.
Nice meeting
All
you.
right. Bye.